webinar. We have a great audience. We have over 200 people who are joining us right now. We are happy to start. My name is Doron Latzer, and I'm one of the founding partners of Perel Cohen. Perel Cohen is a leading law firm in technology in Israel and in the US and in Europe. As you can see, we have 6 different locations. We are over 330 people. What makes us different from other law firms is that we are both an IP firm and a commercial law firm. We have over 200 attorneys in the firm. We have a very big IP practice, and we cater for all across the ecosystem companies. We have very early stage companies and we have mature companies, and we've been around for the last 25 years. With me here today, we have Guy Amir.
Hello.
And we have in New York, David Sable. And in Tel Aviv, we have Yossi Vardi, who will actually take the lead from here. And I'd like, Amir, maybe you want to say a few words about the...
Sure, just a couple of words. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone in the US and around the world. My name is Amir, and I'm from the Adler Chomsky Group, which is affiliated with WPP. And that's how I know David Sable, mainly from all the participants. David has been my boss for 6 years in New York and has been my mentor for 25 years now. And right now we are working together with him and WPP in Israel to build a bridge for startup companies and tech companies, Israeli companies that want to come from Israel to New York. And recently we've been dealing a lot with the COVID issue, obviously, as we all did. And we've been getting so many questions about how is the world going to change after COVID? And what's going to be the new normal, or is it going to be a new normal? What should I do about my business? Do I need to transform it? Do I need to pivot it to something else? So I don't see myself qualified to answer this question right now. So usually when I'm in this situation, I go to my mentor, David, which has predicted so many things in my own testimony in the last 20 years. So I did it again, and David said, oh, you know what, this is an interesting discussion. Let's have an open discussion with whomever wants to join and see where it goes. So that's how we came to this point. So guys, David, Yossi, go ahead.
So everybody, I am in New York, as you can tell. My colleagues in Israel don't have to walk around like this, but I've just received a text from my doctor who said that it's social distancing between me and Yossi is enough, so I can take this off now and be myself. So I'm going to take 2 minutes, set up a few axioms, if you will, a few thoughts, and then I'm going to submit myself to my mentor, Yossi Vardi. So the first thing is, I am absolutely crazed every time I read an article about learn about the new normal. I put that in the category of the 10 things you need to learn to look good on Zoom. There is no new normal. Normal is a state of stasis. It's frozen. We are in a situation every day there is new information, every day it changes. So in those of you who have been in the Israeli army know, there's a famous saying, Kol tochnit rak basis l'shinui. Every platform is nothing more, every plan is nothing more than a platform for change. Eisenhower believed this, others in the armies around the world have believed it. We are on a platform of change. There is not a new normal. If you believe there's a new normal, if that's what you're looking for, you will fail. Amir, give me the next one. So that's why you have to understand the difference between planning and plans. You have to, planning is great. We need to have planning. We need to have the infrastructure so that we can change, so that we can be agile, so that we can be constantly on the move. But if you're looking for plans, forget it, because your plans are going to change. They're going to change every day. Whatever you plan today is going to be wrong tomorrow. But if you've done the smart planning, if you have the right resources, if you've allowed yourself the space, you will be successful. Next. This one is important to me, the notion of ingenuity versus innovation. And I think that we live in a time where ingenuity has once again come to the top. I've always believed that the genius of Israeli high tech was ingenuity. Ingenuity is when you solve a problem with minimum resources. Your genius is in how you use a small amount of resources to solve a problem. Innovation has become, how do I deliver pizza quicker? So that's great, and it makes a lot of money for people, but it's not solving the problems of the world. Ingenuity does. Let's not lose that ingenuity. We've seen it when it comes to masks. We've seen it when it comes to people who are able to make respirators for $3,000 instead of the $50,000 they were getting ripped off for. Ingenuity has to be our mantra moving forward. Next one. I think that one of the things that we've seen is that there is no tech messiah. We're not coming out of this with tech being the messiah that's going to save the world. In fact, tech without technique, in other words, tech that isn't human, tech that doesn't have an emotional content, that doesn't allow us to be who we are, is not going to be successful. And we see that with the way people have used Zoom. We don't hear anymore about, I'm going to give you an immersive digital experience. That's not what we get when we talk with each other. We have conferences. Yes, we do business, but we also, families are being able to meet. And we're able to have cocktail hour in the afternoon with our friends. Tech without technique is nothing but software loops. This is what I call the geometry of social distancing. So it begins like this, me, and then there's me and you. And now we're in a straight line, and that's okay, 6 feet, easy to talk, easy to converse, easy to have a conversation. Next. Now I add Yossi, and we have a triangle, but it's perfect because it's 6 feet between all of us. It's equidistant, and we can talk, and we can interact, and we can have conversation, and we can do things, and we can be collaborative because we're all equal in that construct. And then I add Amir, and now I have 4. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. Same 6 feet, whichever way I look. It's beautiful. The problem is when I add a 5th person. And I've seen this time and time again. The geometry of social distancing that I'm calling it, Yossi pointed out to me the Allen curve, which goes back to the 70s. And it was a theory that the further apart engineers were, the less they were able to collaborate, the less they communicated. And for a while, people believed it. And then the internet came and everybody said, no, the Allen curve doesn't exist anymore because we've taken out time and space. Guess what? We put it right back in. Because the truth is, and you've all seen it, when you get on a Zoom call and there are 10 people talk over each other. It's hard to figure out which box to look at. So we need to understand that there's a geometry here. There's a geometry of humanity. And we need to dial into this geometry of humanity in order to be successful. And last, alone versus lonely. I think coming out of this, we really need to understand the difference. So many people were alone during the pandemic, and it was okay because they were able to use their social tools and their phones and their Zooming and whatever in the right way. But they also had people who came to their homes and left meals. And they also had people who went by and waved. But then there were the people who woke up to the fact that the 500 friends they had on Facebook just weren't real. And they were lonely. And loneliness is a killer. COVID found those people. And so we need to understand the difference in our tech world of alone and lonely. So those are just a few of my thoughts, and I will now subject myself to my dear mentor, Yossi Vardi.
David, thank you very much, and Doron and Amir, thank you for hosting this gathering. David, let me rewind back a little bit and get back to your background so the people that don't know you too well, if there are any in the world who don't know you, know a little bit to whom they are listening. You were running some of the most iconic advertising companies in the industry, in the world, in the galaxy. I don't know. Can you mention them very, very shortly?
Yeah, sure. So I had the great privilege of being at Wunderman, which is one of now called Wunderman Thompson, one of the premier digital data companies in the world, founded by Lester Wunderman in the 50s, probably the first company to really use data in an intelligent, predictive, and analytic way. And then also at Young and Rubicam VML, now called VML Y&R, which I think today is one of the premier advertising agencies in the world who truly understand how data, analytics, creative, and connecting with people and building brands all comes together in an incredibly interesting way.
You said you were there, you were in the cafeteria. What you were doing there?
In the cafeteria? I always go to the cafeteria. It's the best place to be.
No, but what was your role?
So I was I was president and COO of Wunderman, and I was global COO, the chairman of Y&R and VML.
And you started your career in this industry at what age?
I was actually in high school. I started writing copy. My dad's friend had an ad agency, and I became a copywriter. I learned design. As literally in high school, I was producing commercials and writing ads and working with designers and designing ads, working with newspapers and designing ads. And then I had the luck to get into Y&R's training program, and the rest just sort of took off.
Yeah, so you spent a good, what, 35, 40 years in the industry?
Yeah,
Starting
more.
with your high school.
I'm getting old, Yossi, yes.
Yeah, eventually you will figure how this industry works. Now,
eventually I'll wonder, yes, exactly.
now,
I did it because I couldn't pass the math tests to be a doctor or a lawyer, so I figured I'd go into this business.
yeah, what your mother said that you didn't become a doctor?
I think she was happy. She figured that I would never study hard enough anyway, so.
Okay, your relations with Israel started when?
So my relations with Israel started like any good Jewish boy who grew up in America. Zionism, Israel was part of our life. Early on, I went to a school called Ramaz in New York that taught us Zionism, that taught us the love of Zion. My father was a rabbi that definitely made an impact on my life. And I started coming to Israel as a teenager. I married an Israeli, Debbie. I was very lucky that to be able to find my life partner there. And after we were married, I went on Aliyah. She was already Israeli, and we lived together in Israel for 6 years before we came back to America.
Now tell us the truth, and then we will go to the more hardcore. What her mother said when she brought you home for the first time?
So interestingly enough, it wasn't so much her mother. My mother wanted me to marry Debbie. So I think that in the end, the two mothers worked it out very well between them. So I was lucky.
Okay, and since then you are coming to Israel a few times a year.
Multiple times a year.
And
I work with different companies, and from high tech to my new endeavor, working with the Zahar family on Al-Raz, which is the best china in the world. And I'm very proud to be a part of their management team and helping them bring their incredible product to America.
You are such a promoter, you know, you didn't miss an opportunity to plug it in. No, that was That was good. At a certain point of time, you helped the positioning of and developing the brand of the State of Israel, I remember.
I did. I worked very closely with Ido Aharoni, who at the time, when we first started, was a consul in New York and then later became ambassador. We spent many years working on the notion of Mutag Yisrael, brand Israel around the world, something that he's very passionate about, and I'm still very passionate about.
How happy you are with the result of your work, and how happy you are with the product?
So I think that everything that we've said for the past 20 years since we started has been true. The notion of that in America, the issue is unfortunately not anti-Semitism or anti-Israel as much as it's just sort of a distancing of the relevance of Israel, the importance of Israel from many of the younger people. And we're still seeing that. Having said that, Israel remains a strong brand, even in the United States. So the good news is that we are a strong brand, and and our reputation is actually good. It could be better, and we need to make sure that the next generation coming up, the younger generation, including Jews, keep that close connection to Israel, because it is a place of importance to them, a place that they understand is theirs and ours together.
Okay, let's move for a couple of minutes about the state of your wonderful city, with Zeibar closed, the Metropolitan Opera closed, the Metropolitan Museum closed, the Madison Square Garden closed, the subway barely work. How is life in New York these days?
So New York is a ghost town. New York is pretty scary. I tell you, first of all, seeing everybody wearing a mask as they walk through the streets is really shocking. And just driving down the streets and not seeing a lot of cars and not being caught in traffic is quite concerning and is scary. It's like being in a bad movie. I think that New York, unfortunately, the government of the city of New York is not that good. And not only were they, not that anybody, as I said before, the plans had to change every day, but there wasn't even preparedness. And I think that we were late to the game. A lot of equivocating. I'm hoping New Yorkers are resilient. New Yorkers are very resilient people. We have come back from tragedy. We've come back from crisis before. And I have every belief that New York will come back. And you can see behind me, this is a picture that I took just by chance 3-4 days before the city closed from 7 World Trade Center, from Silvertech, which is the incubator of the Silversteins. And it was just a beautiful, there 7 World Trade Center. I saw this magnificent rainbow and I took this picture. So to me, I've only started putting this back up again recently because that's my picture of hope. New York will come back. New York will be as powerful as it ever was. It'll be different. As I said, there will be no new normal. We're going to work in a different way. I think that way we work is going to evolve, but I don't count New York out ever.
We have a question here from the audience, and one of the question is, a new startup, a new founders want to set up a new company. Is it a good time to start now?
So any time is a good time to start if you have a problem that you're solving. So yes, why wouldn't this be a good time? I mean, the papers, first of all, Google startups of the past 2 months. There have been a number that I've read about, people who have solved specific problems. So there's a company in New York, a little company actually founded by an Israeli woman, Maya Kamarov, called Cinch, that was created a neighborhood platform for connecting stores and residents in a neighborhood. And she realized that the problem to be solved was actually delivering from those stores that we all love to people's homes. So that it wasn't just that you got 20 packages from Amazon, but you get 1 box that somebody collected from the 3 or 4 stores you wanted to buy from. Literally, she started it overnight and is already seeing success. So the answer is, if you're solving the right problem, yes.
What are the right problems this day? Where would you go and where wouldn't you go?
So I think that the right problems are, for example, problems in the neighborhood. How do I help a neighborhood store compete when they don't have the digital infrastructure that, let's say, an Amazon has, when they know that they have to deliver, but they can't afford to deliver just one piece. So that to me is a great problem to solve. There are probably any number of problems that you can think about. I mean, one I could think about is, how do you get on a subway? Is there a better way for you to, can you put on that? And I've seen it, right? Like, people are coming up with interesting disposable gowns that you could just kind of pull up, ponchos you can pull over your head and get on a subway and be less scared. So I think that as we go forward, people are going to find new problems to solve. Every day there'll be a new one, and hopefully they'll be successful.
David, where do you see the advertising industry going in this not new world?
So I think I'm always bullish on the advertising industry. I believe that the advertising industry is an industry that moves into every technology of distribution, of communications distribution that ever was. So we went from the walls of caves to papyrus, to Gutenberg's press, to paper, to television, radio, cinema, and now digital. Something will replace digital one day, and advertising will still be done, because what we do is we tell stories that connect us to people. Now, the beauty is today we have way more data, we have way more analytics. We're able to make that story, that messaging, way more attractive. But, and I say this with humility, if you don't have a good story, if the creative isn't interesting, if I haven't made you feel there's a reason to talk to me, all your analytics, all of your retargeting is useless, because you need to be able to tell that story. So I think that my industry is going to be here 1,000 years from now. But
there is one major problem with the digital advertising. You want to get more exposures. You look what the guy is interested. You shove into him the thing that he's interested. So you just reinforce what he already like and what he already think and what already motivate him. And you are polarizing, you are convincing the convinced, and you are polarizing the audience to those who like this product and this product. So
right, Yossi, you speak my language, and that's exactly the truth. And that's why the notion of just, and by the way, Facebook will tell you this as well, don't be so narrow in your communication, because exactly to your point, what happens is you create an ever smaller circle of interest. So as our friend Oren Galib has told me many times, if I start trying to sell you a Mercedes-Benz because I know that Yossi Vardi is in the market and you've got the income for it and you're ready, and in 2 weeks you're going to buy a car, if that's the first time I expose you to that product, the chances of you buying it are not that good. But if I've exposed it to you from the time you're younger, when you first come into the market, and I create the need, I create the want, I create the aspiration for it, then when I'm able to use those targeting tools, because then I know where you sit in that process of buying and wanting, I'll be more successful. So I think that, yeah, I totally agree with you. Advertising, branding, creating a need is always bigger, has to be bigger than just that moment. Because if it's just that moment, you won't be successful.
We got a question from the audience about remote working. How do you see this trend? Is it temporary? Is it going to stay with us? Is it viable? How it will affect other markets? You have 2 seconds to think and shoot the answer.
Yeah, I thought about this a lot, and I've written about this. I believe that remote working, so first of all, remote working, the notion of it is not new. In fact, if you go back and look at the time before Silicon Valley blew up into what it is today, everybody was talking about telemarketing was the next big trend. And then what happens, Facebook and others come along and they create these beautiful office campuses, and they start giving everybody free food and gymnasiums and you know, they do their dry cleaning and their laundering, whatever they want, to keep people together, because the serendipity of having people together, the serendipitous ability to create new ideas and collaboration is obviously much better when humans are together. Having said that, I think that we've discovered that there are things that do work in telemarketing or in teleworking. And I think that we're going to make a decision. So there will be, first of all, coming back, if you're in a huge tower, there's no way that everybody's going to get into those offices at the same time. So I think in the beginning, they'll probably be, you'll be in 2 days a week, 3 days a week, you work at home for a day or two a week. And somebody might decide, you know what, it works for me a day a week, maybe 2 days, that's fine. But my view is that the importance of humanity, the importance of being together will overcome that, and we'll find the right ways to be back together. So there'll be a mixture of the two, but it will not be all just telework. It's just not going to be.
What it will do to Main Street USA, you know, to the aggregation of all these wonderful small shops which represent the taste of their owners, you know, this kind of wonderful quilt of small retail where people like to stroll. What will happen to it?
Guys, an interesting question from the audience to both of you, from a guy called Mikey, who claims to have introduced you to one another in the past.
Ah, Mikey, sure. Yeah.
How are you?
And he's asking, can you say what, let's relate to your question, Yossi, can you say what life in the future will be, like specifically restaurant, Broadway shows, religious gathering, restaurants? Will we now be living with potential pandemics in our lives? Which is interesting because I guess to the people in the audience, do we need to think about our businesses now going forward with this pandemic potential in our life for the rest of our life?
Yeah, absolutely.
Before David, before you answer this very good question, I have a very important message to Mikey. Mikey, I got yesterday an email from my friend Victor in Amsterdam who told me that the new herring season just opened. So take notice of it.
All right, Michael, we'll talk about Russ and Daughters later. So that's a really good question, and there are pieces to it, right? So I think that clearly it's going to change, and we've seen what's happening in restaurants. I mean, if you've looked at how some of the restaurants have come back, it's actually quite scary. It's pathetic. So they've moved tables out of the way. Some of them have put up partitions, and this whole what's beautiful about a restaurant is when you come in and you sit tight with the people that you're with, and there's another table, and then there's a buzz and there's a hum. It's going to change. It's going to change. I mean, there's no question. I think it's yet to be seen. I think the problem is, we all know there's a basic economic problem that if I take out 50% or even 30% of the seats, do I raise the prices 30% to make up the difference? Will people pay those prices? Will the atmosphere still be the same? I think, as I said, there is no new normal. We're going to see that change and change and change. I'd also add sports events to this. How is sports events going to look? Now, the truth of the matter is, if you've seen what's going on, NASCAR started racing again in the US. Now, most of the time, you go to a NASCAR race, if you haven't been, so there's 40,000 people in a stadium, and there's another 100,000 people outside cooking and buying T-shirts and whatever, and it's noisy and crazy. But the truth is, you only see the cars a couple of seconds at a time because they're going around the track. And there's a big television audience. So I thought, okay, you know what? So you lose that, but it's not the same as being at a baseball game or a basketball game or a football game, whatever, where you need that huge sound while you're racing. Interestingly enough, the winner of the race came out, and he said the most disconcerting part of it was when he won and came out of the car and there was total silence. And so I thought about that, and I thought that it was so profound in the sense that he's feeling it after. So imagine the basketball players. So even if we set them up in Las Vegas or some remote place and then we just broadcast the games, without the sound of the crowd, how are they going to feel? Because we know that the sound of the crowd motivates one team, scares another team. So again, I think these are all things that are going to be in flux, and we're going to have to see. Movies and Broadway plays the same. Think about it. If you can put only every 8 seats somebody in the theater, who's going to go? Like only the rich people who can afford? It's just not going to work. So these are things that trouble me, and they're things that I think about quite a lot. And I've been talking to people in the theater industry, people in the sporting industry. I talk to them constantly just to listen to some of the ideas. But yes, Michael, you're right. These are things that are going to be in constant flux, I would say, for the next 2 years. And, Amir, to your point, the notion of pandemic, that's going to continue. First of all, we're going to be scared from now on. That's clear. And so that's why I come back to my notion of planning versus, we need to make sure that our planning is right. So we better damn well make sure that we have enough masks and enough respirators, enough whatever. We won't know what vaccine we need. We're not going to know what specific medicines, but we're just going to have to make sure that our planning is in the right place.
David, time is really getting short. You mentioned in your opening a very important point, and this is the human element, the social element, the social thread, which really differentiate between a successful service and successful application and unsuccessful. How do you weave into your product this social thread?
So I think that the only way to create a product is to start thinking about people. The only way to think about your office, your business, is people first. If we don't take some people talk about digital first, and some people talk about mobile first, and there was a time we were thinking about wearable first, and who knows what we'll think about next first. My view is that when you start that way, you've limited your potential success because you haven't thought about anything other than the system in which you're going to deliver the message. You haven't thought about who gets it, the user. You haven't thought about what the implications are. So my view is, whatever you do, you have to think about people first. You have to think about, how does it work? What's important? What problem am I solving? Like, I once heard Bill Gates say that the only time that they weren't successful was when they tried to change human behavior as opposed to enhance human behavior. So Excel works because it's a spreadsheet. He just made it easier. Word works because it's typing. He just made it easier and more efficient. But if you remember, they went through a period of time where they had that little clip thing that was trying to tell people what to do. It was a total failure because people weren't interested. There's just certain things that we like to do because it's human and it works, and why would we change it? There's no point to it. There's no percentage to it. So if we start from the humanity of everything, every product, every service, every technology, those are the people who will be the most successful, without a doubt. And by the way, I'll point out Tesla. I think it's so fascinating. So as much as it's the electric car and it's whatever, the environment, whether it is or not is another issue. But if you go back and look at the way it was marketed, it was about how fast it went. It was about how beautiful it looked. It was the magnificent showroom. So he understood, he deeply understood that when you start from humanity, when you start from human need, when you start from the things that talk to me, the stories that are important to me, that's how you're successful.
And I know that you are in close touch with many Israeli entrepreneurs and Israeli startups in New York. Can you take us for 2 minutes to the Israeli scene in New York? How do you see it?
So the Israeli scene in New York is really, is vibrant, is incredible, in my view, is very connected. I find that Israelis in New York who are part of the infrastructure of the high-tech world are very collaborative. They're very open. They're very generous to share. You know, the old story of the ugly Israeli that used to float around, and the aggressive sort of not listening Israeli just doesn't exist for most of the companies that I know. I find that I love being with them. Whether it's, you know, somebody who's at the top, whose company has had huge success, whether it's somebody who's just starting. I find that people are connected. I find that people are focused on what they're doing, are open to dialogue, open to understanding. They ask good questions. And again, I think they're generous. They're generous in their time, and they're generous in their thinking. And frankly, to me, incredibly inspiring. And by the way, this is just
you
like
are such a promoter, you know, it's unbelievable.
No, but Yossi, it's true. And they're not only inspiring, they are the best story of Zionism that exists, because they're proud. They're proud of who they are. You know, it's really interesting. There was a time back in the mid 80s when Israelis were coming to New York, there was an Israeli underground, right? I remember people would come to my office and I'd know they were Israeli. I mean, they didn't tell me, but I knew they were. And if I would try to, you know, you play that game, you throw out a Hebrew word and you try to see if somebody, they wouldn't engage with you. They didn't want to be Israelis. Today, people are proud of where they come from. They're proud of the notion of Startup Nation. They're proud of what they do. And it's not about politics. It's not, because they cross every gavan, every, you know, spectrum of the political nature. But they are good, and they're being successful. So, promoting or not, honestly, it's true.
David, companies who wish, we have a couple of questions, but one more question. Israeli companies who wish to come to New York, is it a good time to come, or should they wait?
It depends if they want to fly for 12 hours and not use the bathroom on the plane.
We have a question, by the way, from somebody in the travel industry.
I would say business atmosphere now. Is it, are they open for meetings, or are people not engaged and open to meet? Israeli?
No, I think people aren't going to meet you. You know, if they meet you, they're going to meet you like this. You know, maybe. I think it's early for face-to-face meetings, so you might as well just continue to Zoom and, you know, hope for a meeting in the next few months. I think it's going to be a while, particularly people they don't know. I mean, they don't know you. You're not wearing a mask in Israel, so even though Israel was successful, I think people here are a little nervous still. So I wouldn't make that the cornerstone of your success, of having to come here and meet with people. I would figure out how to do it so that you can get the process going, and then when you can come and sit on the plane for 12 hours without going to the bathroom.
Doron, when we met online earlier this week, you gave me such a jewel that I really love to share it with the audience, but I'm not going to do it unless you permit me to do it.
Please go ahead.
Should I go ahead? Yeah, you're not going to be debarred?
No, hopefully not, we'll see.
Hopefully not. Not before the end of this. We'll see.
Okay, so again, I would like again to thank the Pearl Cohen office for hosting it. When we met earlier this week to plan this session, I asked Doron, whom I met for the first time, what actually is the difference between a bet and a lawyer? So it took him about 3 seconds to come with an answer. A bet you can vaccine against COVID. That was the answer. So that was a very good, and he gave me the answer in 3 seconds because this was a free answer. You know, he didn't charge for it, so he didn't have to think about to build time. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Yossi. Thank you, David. Thank you, Amir.
You want to end it, or one last question?
Go ahead.
These guys, I think, can give some inspiration to the younger generation. Andy David is asking, in a disrupted world with a growing rate of disruptive events, what would you recommend to young people as the most important skills they should master?
So I think that the most important skills that young people should master are the following. The first is the ability to listen. Listening is a skill, and it's a skill that has sadly fallen off over the past few years. And I think that listening is critical. And listening is critical because listening is not just hearing. Listening is deeply understanding. It's understanding people. It's understanding body language. It's understanding a situation. It's being able to take in information and turn it into something important. So I think listening is important. The second thing is patience. I think patience is critical. I think that we live in a time when you have to be patient. Like we're all patient now. I mean, we're sitting in our homes. We're sitting wherever. Right? You're not. We are here still in New York. And if there wasn't patience, if people hadn't been able, and I've seen it, I've seen people literally fall down and have breakdowns because they just weren't able to sit, and they didn't have the patience to understand that this was temporary. It's going to change. It's going to constantly change. So listening, patience, and the ability to think. Thinking is a big deal. And to me, thinking there's a reason that IBM used that as their slogan back in the 50s or the 40s maybe, and they come back to it. Thinking is huge. And you know, we live in a time when it's sort of understood that I have to answer in a second, that I need it because I have it all in real time. And I have to, yeah, that could be true, but sometimes you just have to take a step back and think. And the truth is, I'm seeing a lot more of it from companies. I'm hearing a lot more about this from people. You know, it's so interesting. I spoke to 2 companies yesterday that are in the ad tech arena who do literally chew up huge amounts of data. One of them is they actually use a band that goes on your head where they get your brain waves. And every one of them have analysts now working, not just looking at how the software analyzes the data, but they have humans who look at it and think about it so they can understand it. So I think listening, patience, and thinking, and then learn whatever the hell else you want to learn. But if you can't apply those 3 things, don't
Can I
bother.
offer you my 3 things?
No,
I think that what I would suggest is the following 3 things. Number 1, try to be curious. Curiosity, I think, is the mother of every intellectual endeavor and every business success. Second, wonder with A. Just go places, both intellectually and physically. Go in the street, stroll in the street, go to countries, read books, go to museums, go to meetings that you don't sure you know what it's about. Just let yourself wander to encounter many experiences. And once you do these 2 things, find the thing you are passionate about. If you find something that you are passionate about and you are going to pursue it,
Awesome.
you are going to succeed, because passion is the best driving force.
Amazing, absolutely. And notice, by the way, Amir and Doron, not coding and not mechanical engineering and not biotech. Those are things that you go learn, but those aren't drivers. Those are just things. You know, it was Einstein who said that imagination is more important than knowledge. So if you have imagination, like Yossi said, like if you take that, it drives your passion, you'll go much further in life.
All right.
Wonderful.
Now I think we can wrap it up.
Thank you very much. And thank you all the audience who joined us on this webinar. Thank you.
And David wants to give the audience his email if anybody wants to write him an email.
And thank you, Yossi, my mentor.
What is your email, David?
So my email is David, Sable, S-A-B-L-E, @WPP.com. Everybody who knows me knows you send me an email. I will do my best to send you an answer. And it comes from me, not from some machine learning. I promise you, it's not a chat box. It's straight from me. And thank you, Yossi. I love you.
It's mutual. And thank you, Doron, very much, and Amir.
Thank you, guys. And now I got to go back to New York.